there. Come on in. Thank you for joining us this Monday on First Take. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend. Super Bowl 50 week is underway, 6 days away. Molly Karam here solo in Bristol. Your boys, where are they? Here they are. Skip Bayless in New York City, Stephen A. in LA. We've got you covered coast to coast. Hi, gentlemen.
What's up? What's up? How y'all doing?
Stephen A., I'm holding down the fort here in your town, New York City, where, as you know, I could probably get elected mayor before you could in New York.
Yeah. Once again, you're going to start off the show fabricating stuff to the American public. You should be ashamed of yourself. It's Monday morning. Get your act together. Come on now. Come on now.
Yeah, okay, here we go.
One of those. Let's work, gentlemen. All right, we kick things off here. Former Rams coach Mike Martz is surprised that Terrell Owens is a Hall of Fame finalist in his first year of the ballot, while former Rams wideouts Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt were not. Telling the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, quote, "Surprised isn't the word. You can't print how I felt when T.O. leapfrogged those two. That's just plain out-and-out ridiculous. If they big-timed it and did all that dumb stuff, they'd get in probably earlier." Terrell Owens responded to Martz's comments with the following tweet. LOL, nope, doesn't surprise me. I expect the devil to become busy when God is in the midst of a blessing. The class of 2016 will be decided Saturday, the day before the Super Bowl. Stephen A., does Martz have a point here?
No, he does not. I mean, listen, Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce were big time. There's no question about it, and I definitely think that they are worthy of Hall of Fame consideration, if not ultimate induction. But they are not Terrell Owens. And the fact is that Mike Martz, in part, I'm not going to sit there and excoriate the man because he's coming to the defense of players that he specifically coached, and I can respect that. He was an offensive coordinator, obviously, when they won the Super Bowl. He was a guy that took them to the Super Bowl as a head coach. He's a guy that coached them for several seasons, and he did a relatively decent job. That can't be denied. But the reality is that when you look at things from a statistical perspective, there's just no question that Terrell Owens deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and he certainly deserves it ahead of both Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt. It's just that simple to me. When you think about the way that he played, the way that he performed, how he was second all-time in career touchdowns, or I'm sorry, you got most career touchdowns in NFL history. He's fifth all-time. You got most receiving touchdowns. He's third all-time, okay? And in terms of receptions, he's right behind Jerry Rice. He was absolutely sensational. He was one of the elite receivers this game has ever seen. And when I see comments like Mike Martz made against him, it's just undeniable that there's some, you know, you've got a lot of people that are against Terrell Owens because of his behavior. And I understand that. I respect that. I mean, you look at people and they'll sit there and say, you know, he was a distraction. He had a detrimental effect on the locker room. All of those things may be true, but they're highly subjective because the fact is that he had a lot of teammates in those locker rooms who were very, very supportive of him. And despite all of the acrimony, despite all of the distractions, but despite all of the potential venom aimed in his direction, some of it self-inflicted without question. He brought some of it on himself. In the end, ultimately, we are forced to go back to the numbers because we can't get into personal feelings to decide and define whether or not somebody's a Hall of Famer or not. You can't allow that to gloss over their level of productivity. And when you look at Terrell Owens and you look at the numbers, there is no question that Terrell Owens is one of the greatest wide receivers in NFL history. He is a first ballot Hall of Famer, and Mike Martz, who is supposed to know football, should know that much. Again, I'm not going to knock him, but so much because I understand he is not some guy just arbitrarily throwing something out there. He is a man who coached both Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt. So I understand and respect the fact that he's coming to the defense of one of his own players, and I get that. But in this particular instance, he used it to try to denigrate Terrell Owens, and the numbers just don't support that. Terrell Owens is a first ballot Hall of Famer. There is no question about it. And as far as I'm concerned, Mike Martz is wrong in this equation.
Here we go again. As you well know from doing this show with me for many years, I do have and did have a problem with Terrell Owens' behavior because it impacted the team's ability to win football games. So I like what Mike Martz said to a point. He has a point to a point. And you're exactly right, Stephen A. Before I get back to Terrell Owens, obviously Mike Martz, who returned in '99 to be the offensive coordinator of what became the greatest show on turf in St. Louis, was defending his own. A veteran receiver at that point in Isaac Bruce, a perennial All-Pro, and a rookie that year in Torrey Holt, who helped Mike Martz win a Super Bowl ring. So we get that. And just for the record, I believe Isaac Bruce does belong in the Hall of Fame because his numbers are right there with Terrell Owens, except, as you point out, for the touchdowns, 153 for Terrell and 91 for Isaac Bruce. I like Torrey Holt personally. We've had him on the show. I do not think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I don't think he merits Hall of Fame, certainly first or second ballot consideration. Maybe down the line, I don't know. It seems like these days everybody's getting in eventually. But in this case, and by the way, Marvin Harrison, even if you compare Marvin Harrison's numbers to Isaac Bruce's, I think Bruce should get in or at least be on the final ballot ahead of Marvin Harrison. That's just me. Now, back to what Mike Martz said that I did love. If Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt had big-timed it, as Mike Martz said, and done all that dumb stuff, then they probably said Mike Martz would get in earlier. Now, what's all the quote-unquote dumb stuff? The way I define it, it's what Terrell did, pulling the Sharpie from his sock and signing the football and taking it over and giving it to his manager sitting in one of the boxes behind the end zone in Seattle. I was there that night. It's Terrell taking the pom-poms from the cheerleaders and doing a pom-pom dance because it was entertaining and it was exciting and something we'd never seen before. It was Terrell Owens saying, "Get your popcorn ready," because you never knew what he might do next. I get all that. But listen, nobody ever self-promoted better than Terrell Owens. And because this has reared its ugly head again, I'm forced to say again that I was around the first team and very close to the second team and even the third team that Terrell Owens split and tore apart. I'm sorry, it's just hard for me to forgive and forget that Terrell Owens publicly blasted Steve Mariucci, his head coach in San Francisco, and Greg Knapp, his offensive coordinator in San Francisco, and Jeff Garcia, his quarterback in San Francisco. He attacked him publicly. And then on we went to Philadelphia, and eventually he blasted Andy Reid publicly. And then it was Brad Childress, the coordinator, blasted him publicly. And we all know how he went after Donovan McNabb publicly. On to Dallas. And eventually, he went after Bill Parcells publicly. And then Todd Haley, the receivers coach, publicly. And it was one thing after another that divided those teams. And I'm with you. There are some players who really believed in Terrell, and I've told him this to his face on this show. And there are other players who really, really did not believe in his self-promotion and thought it wasn't just a distraction, that it was team obliterating. And that's why I nicknamed him Team Obliterator. So all of the above is why it's just hard for me to get comfortable with Terrell Owens in the Hall of Fame. I cannot argue with the numbers. I can't deny them. I get where you're coming from. There's a big part of Terrell I like personally. And as you know, you sat with us on the show. We've gone back and forth. I used to talk to him early on in San Francisco. For a while, I was the lone defender of Terrell Owens in the Bay Area media. But after a while, you just sit back and say, my goodness, this man is just a disaster for team after team after team, and that counts to me in Hall of Fame voting. So I get where Mike Martz is going. He's defending, protecting his own, but the point he made was right. I think a lot of people fixate on Terrell Owens as more of an entertainer than a football player. And by the way, Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt do have a ring, and Terrell Owens has no rings.
Well, first of all, it is incredibly ridiculous and insulting that anybody would say Terrell Owens is an entertainer more than a football player. That is just incredibly insulting. We're talking about one of the elite receivers to have ever played the game. Not only is Terrell Owens just as much, if not more so, of a football player than an entertainer, this man was one of the best wide receivers in NFL history. You could make an argument that he brought entertainment. He helped, brought more entertainment to the game because of what he was able to do on the football field. If Terrell Owens couldn't ball, if he couldn't play lights out, if he couldn't exhibit Hall of Fame credentials, then there would have been nothing about him that was entertaining. It would have been flat out annoying. That's number one. Number two, consider the source. Who in God's name is Mike Martz to talk about anybody? I mean, when you talk about being eccentric, a bit off kilter, whose behavior is a bit different than the conventional, prototypical, in his case, coach, as opposed to a player, Mike Martz is in a position to critique somebody in terms of their behavior. Let's pump the brakes on that one. Point number three, when you look at what you pointed to, and you talked about if you're Skip Bayless, who covered him, and who literally, and continuously highlighted the bad stuff about Terrell Owens. I have no problem with you, Skip, because you are a reporter who was a columnist who covered Terrell Owens in several destinations for several years. Your opinions are valid in terms of how you specifically feel. I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is that if this were any other coach, what would he be saying? Look at the numbers. Look at the level of productivity. Coaches and players alike in the NFL would tell you, let's not be subjective here, because if we're going to be subjective and we're going to get into character flaws, A, there are an abundance of people in the Hall of Fame with questionable character and questionable actions on and off the field of play, inside and outside the locker room. They managed to make it to the Hall of Fame. And then you have to consider also, Skip, that it's a dangerous thing to get caught up in how we feel about an individual to the point where it usurps their credentials. I'm not sitting there and saying that Skip Bayless shouldn't say, okay, I know he's a Hall of Famer, but I don't like it. I'm not looking forward to that moment where he's up there being celebrated for his greatness because he was too much of a distraction and I thought he was a detriment to his team. I don't like it, but I can't argue with the numbers. That's an entirely different argument than saying he's not worthy of the Hall of Fame because you didn't like him or because somebody didn't like him in his personality. Terrell Owens went to the playoffs 8 times. Went to the playoffs 8 times. It wasn't like the guy never won anything. They were productive teams a lot more often than not when he played the game of football, and in large part due to his greatness. So when you look at it from that perspective, then we have no choice but to lean on the numbers. And the numbers say this man is a Hall of Famer. If Terrell Owens isn't in the Hall of Fame, we are essentially saying you don't belong in the Hall of Fame because we don't like you. And what kind of precedent is that to set for a professional athlete who, by the way, Terrell Owens, he definitely was a bit petulant at times. He definitely could have done a lot of things differently. I'm not here to completely absolve him from the things that he did wrong. But there's no question that he was great. There's no question that he was committed to greatness. There's no question that he took care of his body. He was in phenomenal condition. There are a lot of things that a lot of guys don't do that Terrell Owens did do that warrant Hall of Fame consideration as well. Everything about the dude ain't bad. There are a lot of good things about Terrell Owens. And I'm not saying he's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But there's bad stuff, and then there's good stuff. When you combine the good stuff with his numbers, you have to acknowledge it's Hall of Fame credentials. And nobody, including Mike Martz, should refute that. It's just that simple.
Okay, nobody is saying we don't like you, Terrell Owens, if they don't vote for Terrell Owens, if they're a Hall of Fame voter. What they would say would be, Stephen A., we don't like what you did to 3 very good teams that should have gone a lot farther than each of those 3 teams did in San Francisco and Philadelphia and in Dallas. Those were 3 loaded football teams.
Dallas?
And I got to remind you, yes, it was. Dallas, would they go like 14-2 that year before Eli beat them in Dallas in the playoffs?
Yeah, it wasn't 14-2.
Remember, okay, in Philadelphia, what happened in that playoff run led by Donovan McNabb to the Super Bowl against the Patriots? Terrell couldn't play. Remember that? The horse collar tackle injury okay, so he couldn't play in the playoff games, did play in the Super Bowl. So, and they lost that game, obviously. So my point to you is the Terrell that I studied, and again, I don't hate him. In fact, there's much about. I really like having him on our show. I enjoy sparring with him. He's deep. He's smart. He's insightful. I've told you this before, and I told Terrell this to his face last time he was on the show. The great Bill Walsh once told me that nobody at the chalkboard was smarter than Terrell Owens. Of all the players Bill Walsh coached and tutored and was in any kind of film session with, Terrell knew everything that was going on the field, all other offensive positions. He knew them better than those players who played those positions knew what their assignments were. So I don't dislike him. He couldn't help himself. It was always about blame deflection. It was about don't blame me, blame them. It's their fault for my shortcomings. And I do remind you again, I don't have the stats in front of me, but at least 3 times he led the league in drop footballs, drop passes. So it adds up to me that you're disqualified. I'm sorry. You had an impact on the field in a very negative way and not a positive way. All those numbers you give me wound up empty. They were empty numbers to me.
Yeah, but they're empty numbers to you, but they can't be empty, Skip. You can't do that. Because to do that is to eradicate everything based on subjectivity. The fact of the matter is, Skip Bayless, there are 2 sides to every story. The fact of the matter is it was a divided locker room because there were some people who sided with Terrell Owens. There are some people that said he wasn't as wrong as he was portrayed, that he was disliked by some and loved by many, many others. There were some people that sat up there and said that he was an honest person, that he would look guys in the face and tell them exactly where he stood and what things needed to be done. You have some people who embraced it. You had some people who were put off by it. You had some people who were offended by it. What I'm saying is that in terms of his behavior, it's a very convoluted situation that we're talking about here. I'm not trying to say he wasn't a distraction or anything like that, but why was he a distraction? Was it because he was doing something illegal? Was it because he was acting up off the field or anything like that? No, it was because his personality was different than some of theirs. He was willing to look them in the face and talk to them about what they needed to do. I'm not trying to absolve T.O. I didn't like when he was on the sideline and embarrassing Nap like that by demanding the ball and all of that other stuff. I had no problem with the pom-poms. I love that move. Didn't bother me at all. You know, and I went a little bit too long with the autograph or whatever. But what I'm saying is, think about what you're saying here. It's a matter of taste. It's very subjective. When it comes to the Hall of Fame, we can't allow ourselves to get to that point. It can't be subjective. It has to be about facts you can stand on. And years from now, and when he's long gone, and if T.O. is in the Hall of Fame, which he will be because he should be, ultimately what you are going to look at is the numbers. I don't know the story of every single Hall of Famer in basketball, baseball, football, and beyond. What I know are their numbers, and their numbers validate their presence in the Hall of Fame. There is no question that Terrell Owens deserves up in there. I love Michael Irvin and a few others. Okay, they're in the Hall of Fame. They weren't perfect. They were distractions, okay? But they won, and they put up the numbers. Terrell got the numbers. You can't deny this man that. That's not right. It's not right.
Molly, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one.
That's exactly what I was just going to say, Skip. You took the words out of my mouth. All right, we'll leave it there. We'll see what happens Saturday. The class of 2016 will be decided the day before the Super Bowl, of course, with inductions scheduled for August. Other finalists, they alluded to some of them: Brett Favre, Kurt Warner, Marvin Harrison, and the late Ken Stabler. Another guy who's looking like a potential